Welcome, everybody. More people joining in here, I see. One thing I like to do for fun, just check how many people are registered. 255 people today. Cool. All right. I'm pulling up the screen share now. I'll do this, a share. And as per usual, I am bringing up the Q&A here. I guess I can do it this window. And then I'm going to bring up the chat here. And then participants, bring that up as well. Um, just getting everything situated for you guys. All right. Cool. Already seen some familiar faces. Hey, Manny, Stephanie, Jeffrey, Eric, Dennis, how are you guys doing here? Just going to be throwing up also before I jump into all of the details, the school that I run here. You guys get 7 days for free. All my courses are in there as a thank you for you guys joining these webinars. I do post nearly every day in there, especially about all of the recaps on these webinars if you ever miss one. And it's going to be beneficial for you to watch it. So be sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. I love seeing the people that attend these webinars in there. Today is going to be an interesting one. Uh, it's already been an interesting morning. We're actually at Contracts Connected releasing. We released a late last night, so it was a late one. We released the first ever full end-to-end AI-powered negotiation and redline tool between general contractors or prime contractors, even if you're a subprime, primes and their vendors. So we now no longer just issue the contract, but we handle the entire negotiation process back and forth within an enclosed environment and AI insights around those. So pretty cool, pretty exciting day today. I have a lot to do and as far as that feature release later today. So pretty excited. Wanted to share that with you guys just because that's been something we've worked on for literally 9 months in different iterations, and it was not easy to do it, but we are the first to do it. So usually when you're the first to do something, you have to learn a little bit more in terms of pain and lessons than maybe the third or fourth person to do it. So that was awesome. Now, what I did last week is I actually flew out to San Diego, and I met with a general contractor. They have about 100 employees or so. They do some public stuff, not a ton, but I got a ton of value from the time that I spent at that GC. And basically, what I did is I just sat in their conference room with five of their team members. And we basically walked through different processes that they're currently doing in their organization, everything from, contract creation to scope drafting to, collecting bids, managing the bids from different vendors, buyout, the accounting side, the W-9s, the COIs, the weekly certified payrolls. And what we really found was like there were so many like fragmented softwares and what the PM would say is like, oh, well, like I hand it off to the project coordinator and I just then eventually get a document back. And that's great, But he's like, I had no clue everything she was doing on her end. And then to her point, she had no clue everything the accounting team was doing on their end, all of the different processes and clicks and stuff like that. And it was like, I think they got just as much value out of walking through everybody's different processes as I did. They also talked to me a lot about, we have all of this data and all of these softwares, and we have all of these files on all of our servers. And like, how do we leverage them? How do we unlock them, basically? How do we make them accessible? And how do we just build this like ever evolving and growing brain for the organization on things we already have? And that's what inspired me about today's webinar topic. And I spent 2.5 hours there, and it was probably like some of the most valuable 2.5 hours I've ever spent for Contracts Connected. And like how do we build a better, back office operating system on that side, but also for you guys here because it's not every day that I get to be on the inside of a general contractor doing like a substantial amount of volume with a substantial amount of employees and actually get to see every process and like then I click this and then I click that and then I do this and then I hand it off to this person and then that person has to do this and I have to email them and notify them that I've done this and that kicks off their process and it was just crazy. And I was thinking and I was talking to them about all the files on their server. I was like, there's pretty simple, like one-line prompts if you connect everything correctly, that can fix your server. They said was like all over the place. The file names were different. The some stuff wasn't in the right folders. I was like, and then they're like, when we go to find stuff, we don't want to like necessarily go in subfolders. We just want to know what is the answer to our question or like just give me that specific document. And I was telling them about how easy it would be to build a AI knowledge system that compounds over time for them, and how they can basically take all that stuff that's locked up in softwares and locked up in all of these other different tools and really just open it up and be able to have like an AI brain that's evolving and continuing to grow here. So I'm gonna jump right into it, but I thought that backstory would be interesting for you guys to know. So this was inspired from that visit to that contractor's office. We got some more people rolling in here. Joseph, Julia, John, nice to see you guys. Brian, yeah, I'm excited for today. I think this will be a good one. This will be actionable. I tried to keep this pretty actionable in terms of like you guys should be able to walk away today and be able to go at least start this. The key thing is going to be a shared knowledge base around these MD documents. Cool. Cool. Yeah, this is going to be our most attended webinar so far, 255 people registered, so pretty cool. I do want to say that you guys should be operating with some sort of urgency. I mean, with my team, I'm constantly like every morning like pushing on us to go faster and to lean into the tools that are available quicker. Just because like there is this gap in time right now where the early adopters are utilizing things, but it's not really common knowledge, like this is more advanced stuff that I'm going to show you guys today is not common knowledge. Like people don't even know that you can unlock all the files in your server, turn them into a brain, and then interact with them and train them on your company. Like that does, like nobody knows that, but it's not hard to do. So the people that like you guys that are joining these kind of webinars and kind of training here, um, you guys will have that advantage. But this advantage is not going to be something that lasts forever. So I always tell my team we need to operate with urgency because we literally have like it's like somebody told us the winning lottery numbers and we need to like act on it before like the numbers are drawn and then everybody knows what they are, right? So construction is facing like that severe labor constraint. I think that another thing that they mentioned to me on Friday was like there's young talent coming out of college and they want to hire young talent. They want to get the A players that are up and coming that will be with their company for 10, 15 years. And they're like, well, these kids coming out of college, like they're trained on Procure, they're trained on all of these systems. They want to use systems, they want to use softwares. They grew up in a place where softwares solve everything. And they don't want to do stuff manually. And they were a little bit stressed because they're like, we need to make sure that we are operating as they expect us to operate if we want to attract that real A player talent. So it all comes down to, having the right systems, and sometimes the right systems mean fewer systems. It doesn't mean buy more software. It doesn't mean, I made a joke. They were giving me a tour around the office and one of the girls was like, oh, they're going to help us with like some solutions around stuff. And I was like, no, no, no. We're going to help you with less solutions around stuff. But preparing for AI means building the foundational knowledge system, not just buying more tools. That's the key that I wanted to get across there. All right. All right, so let's talk about the memory of the company, how it exists today before we transform that memory into something new. So right now, your company does have a memory. It does have knowledge, right? All companies have this. Scattered across daily reports, RFIs, submittals, change orders, lives in meeting minutes, schedules, safety records, unwritten habits. This could also look like emails. This could look like subfolder systems. This could look like servers. This could look like any place information is across your entire organization. Your company does have a memory. Every company has it. Is it being leveraged? Is it being utilized, right? So, why you guys need to kind of like, there's all this hype around AI this, AI that, but I think building the foundation, like you're not going to go build 100-story skyscraper on the beach with no foundation, right? So building your foundation here will allow you to build these AI systems on top of each other. And the key thing that I'm going to show you guys today is a way to build this knowledge that's going to be agnostic from what solutions you want to use. So today it's Claude. Tomorrow, ChatGPT might be on the up and up, like they release a better model. Like 3 months from now, it could be a model we've never even heard of, right? So the key thing is building your knowledge that can operate agnostic from a system. So the pain from switching from one AI chat to another AI program, or even like a software, is minimal, if any, right? So that's just one thing that I want you guys to know about what we're going to be building out today. But meaningful AI adoption does require coordinated action across the company. I think that after my time on Friday, I think a clear roadmap and not just isolated experiments is going to be needed as well. Organizing the institutional memory first is going to provide that compounding advantage, and it's going to enable faster onboarding and concrete data for these AI systems. So if you guys do decide to go buy, a estimating specific solution, these MD files, the way the industry is trending, should be able to be used for training those models to tailor towards the way that your estimators have estimated in the past. Or if you're writing scopes, the way that your scopes have been written in the past, right? So these MD files will be key here. So let's talk about the structure here of this memory and how you'll use it, how we'll build it, and basically just breaking it down piece by piece so you have a good understanding of what's happening behind the scenes before we go build this thing. So there's a source of truth layer. This is going to store your actual documents, right? So think of this as like the way that you guys use servers, SharePoint, maybe you have something locked up in a closet somewhere at the office, that kind of stuff. Then you have AI ready documentation. So this is going to not be the PDFs, but be either summaries of the PDFs with referenceable kind of locations on where to find the actual PDF. This could look like a vector database, which is basically where AI will read a document and chunk it into specific pieces, and then it can reference chunks quicker, find a reference inside of a chunk, and then backtrack to the document. So this is going to be something that's more AI friendly. This type of document here in your source of truth layer, this might take a little bit more compute for the AI to think through, whereas this would be something that is kind of already pre-processed. So when you do ask a question, it's not having to chunk through the PDFs. It has something pre-chunked that it can just rip through. And here we'll talk about that retrieval layer. So within that AI ready kind of red documentation, we have the way that it gets the documents. So if you have 100,000 documents, 300,000 documents, and each document has an average of 5 pages in it, the retrieval of that is going to be enormous, right? So if you're asking it a question, and you're asking it to find a very specific piece of information in a very specific PDF, Instead of it having to go reason and search and reference, if the AI has already processed it and it's storing it in a way which it can go find this document very quickly, the retrieval of it becomes very easy. So the key would be to have it kind of have it pre-processed as part of its like memory. And then you can query it, you can ask it things, and it can find things quicker. And then the model layer. And this is where, the way that you build these previous two steps, it needs to be agnostic from the model layer. So there's things like Opus just came out with 4.7, Anthropic. There's ChatGPT. There's all of these different models, right? But if you can build your system agnostic from a model layer, if Claude and Anthropic decide to 3x their price tomorrow, you don't want to be handcuffed to them. Same with ChatGPT. So there's a trend in which you can build this system agnostic from the model, and you just switch the model very quickly. And you don't have to spend a whole lot of time with the pain of switching away. You guys think about some of the softwares you're kind of really stuck into, like your project management software, your accounting software. How painful would that be to switch away? And, even if there's a world-class better solution that's just like amazing, the pain of switching away is just too great for you guys to leave. You can avoid that by building out a proper AI system here. And I do want to also reference, the compute costs are kind of rising at the moment, and it's unsure. I'm unsure if it's going to be really sustainable for everybody to just be operating off Claude or off ChatGPT. You can already see it with the way that Apple has released a few of their new computers with new chips designed specifically to run AI models at a more optimal rate on their computer. And this is signaling a trend in which we might be running our own models on our own machines. So what that means is that server that you have in your closet might be running an AI model, right? Instead of you pinging up to Anthropic every time you need to ask a question to Claude. So, and that could be in an effort to reduce cost vastly when you're really leaning on this. I'm going to pause right here because I have a Q&A question in the Q&A. What are the platforms that all the historical project data can be stored to start with? So, let me click answer live here. So basically, there's a few different platforms. You don't need to overcomplicate it. If you guys want to just get started, which is what I'm recommending today, you just are going to give it access to the folders in which you want it to have reference to with the correct security, permissioning in mind. The more you give it, the more it will know. But you can use things like Obsidian or something like that. I don't know if you guys have seen that like brain that it builds with all of the context mapped to each other. That does better with it's like purpose built to reference a large amount of data and give you good answers. But to get started, all you need to do is you just need to give it access, and then we're going to train it on those folders and have it build its own kind of directory on how to find the documents that you need. So everything is lucky for you guys in construction, everything is project and then like the vendor commitment, and everything should be structured like that. And if the structure is messy, guess what? We're going to write a prompt that's going to rename all your files to a file naming structure, and we're going to put everything in subfiles so it's organized from the get-go. So then you build out your model to operate off that folder structure of like the project, the vendor within that project, and then the documents around that commitment. So you actually don't even need anything crazy. You don't need an additional subscription. There's nothing else that you really need here. I'm going to show you kind of how to do it with Claude to start with. But you can kind of start out like this. And if you start to find limitations and you want to build something like a vector database, you can go down that route. But today we're going to kind of like focus on, hey, what can we just get started with? If we're starting from day one and our company does not have an AI knowledge brain building and compounding on itself, where do we start and how do we leverage that across the company and how do we give access to that across our employees? All right. Hopefully that answers your question. I know that it wasn't like directly. Um, But evaluation and governance. So somebody needs to, yeah, no problem. Happy to help. Somebody does need to be responsible for this because these MD documents, the documents need to be updated. They need to be kind of like read through. You don't want to just like let it go willy-nilly and just go create a bunch of crazy documents that everyone's going to be like trying to ask questions against. So somebody does need to manage these, and somebody does need to kind of evaluate them and test them once in a while. So this should be literally like a dedicated responsibility to somebody on the team that has the bandwidth, which we all know everybody has tons of bandwidth, right? To take on something new. But once you build it out once, it should be pretty minimal to manage. Okay. It's not a huge commitment. Okay, so I talked about, in that second step, I talked about AI ready documents. So you have your server, and then right on top of your server is what are we would call like AI ready documents. And really that's just because your server just has all of these PDFs, all of these Word docs, all of these documents, and we need to use what's called optical character recognition to read those. So it basically looks at the image of the PDF and it's like, oh, well, that looks like an O, and that looks like a T, and that looks like a U, and it's trying to spell out the whole document, right? With optical character recognition. And that takes a lot of compute, it's expensive, and it's slow. And when you ask questions, you need it quickly. So what's the alternative? It's turning those documents, or at least summaries of those documents, or a reference to those documents into what we call Markdown. And Markdown is AI ready language because Markdown is plain text. And plain text is a format that is readable by humans. Okay, so we can read it, but it's structured for AI. And its simplicity, its portability, and its consistency make it ideal for creating maintainable documentation, bridging the gap between human understanding and machine processing. Now, why is this a good middle ground? One, we can read it. It's going to look, just like you see on this screen. I have an example of what it would look like. It's glowing and stuff. But, instead of it's going to have like hashtags or different things for headers or subheaders. It's going to be just written in plain text, right? And it's the most plain text imaginable, but it's text at the end of the day. We can read it. The formatting might look weird. There's an extra hashtag here, extra hashtag there. So what, right? But the thing is it's so plain and it's so stripped down of any formatting, like headers and paragraphs and indents and bullet points and all of that kind of stuff. All of that is stripped away and it's just literally text in its most simple code form. And that makes it machine kind of like processable at a very quick, deep level because there's no additional compute being wasted on understanding headers and formattings and bullet points and stuff like that. It's literally just the most simple version of text you could imagine. So that is Markdown. I like to, and when you see a Markdown documents, it will be like, you know how it's like .jpeg sometimes or .png or .pdf. A Markdown document is .md. And I like to call Markdown documents memory documents, MD, memory document, Markdown document, whatever. So that is Markdown. And you need to convert. The first step is basically having Claude giving it access to the proper folders and saying, okay, you're now, going to, and we're going to walk through this, but you're now going to basically make a company markdown system based on the folders that I've given you access to. And if there needs to be a better file naming structure, before we create this markdown document for you to perform better and find the right documentation, let's do that first. Let's walk through that first. But the end goal here is to create a markdown document system that everybody can use in their Claude to basically turn all of the static files and whatnot on our server into an operational brain that everybody in our company can leverage. Okay. All right. So anatomy of a project note. So the Markdown document is going to start creating its own structure. And you don't need to necessarily be bothered with this. I just wanted to give you guys an example of what it would do, okay? And the reason you don't need to be bothered with this, I mean, you could be bothered with this if you want. If you want to dictate how it creates its markdown and how it structures its documents, be my guest. But who are you creating this for at the end of the day? You're creating this for Claude to operate off of. And if Claude creates its own document, it's probably going to be able to operate off it in a better way than a human would want it, right? So I let Claude have free reign as far as how it structures documents, how it structures its markdown. The reason being is because I want it to create what, who am I to say what it's going to operate better off of? So you don't need to be bothered with like, oh, well, like here's the format of a markdown, and here's what I want you to do, and here's what I want you to include, and this way and that way, and put this folder here and this subfolder here. It's just a waste of time, in my opinion. And it's easier for you to just say, create the markdown however you want to do it. Trust you. You're going to know how to reference it. Cool. And if anything's missing, we'll address that later, right? So an example could be, project details. So it's going to try to create an idea around this, concise summary of stuff, decisions made. If it's an active project, you could say, open questions, clear list of next steps, and so on. But the key thing that I just wanted to show here is the anatomy. And I just wanted to reference specifically, don't be too hung up on this. Let it create its own. It knows what it's doing. All right. So let's talk about now we have like all of this different knowledge. How do we get this into Markdown in a way that, it can be operational? So company memory. Let's start out. I had my co-founder Lars at Contracts Connected. I had him generate 100-question interview. And this 100-question interview was based on the company memory. So when we're building out our AI agent, which he ended up naming Wendy, so she operates in their Contracts Connected account. She emails vendors. She follows up for missing documents. She takes intake forms from project managers and stuff like that. She enters them into Contracts Connected, finds the missing information, and sends the contract draft off for approval back to Lars. But she needed to know a lot about how the company operates, right? She needed to know, how do you number your projects? What's up with your cost codes? Where do I find this? How do I number my subcontract? All of that stuff, those types of details, those operational kind of SOPs, playbooks, standards, lessons, all of that stuff, why we do things the way that we do, that was like an interview, right? So don't be afraid to there's a lot of stuff that you guys know, that you guys operate. No two construction companies work the same. Build out whoever is kind of like generating and maintaining this first version of the memory documents. Have it interview you about the company. When you start, when were you founded, who founded it, who's the CEO, how does the project team operate? Does the project team rely on project coordinators? What do they rely on project coordinators for? That it will come up with some really great in-depth questions. And the more context you give it, the better. And if you guys aren't using voice mode yet, so you can just speak out way more, and you'll give a much more depth if you're speaking over typing. Trust me, use the voice mode and answer those questions. All right, then we have project memory. This is where that kind of file system comes into play that I was referencing in the past few slides. So here's pretty standard. You're going to give it access to a specific project folder, or you're going to give it access to a specific larger folder system. I would recommend running through the exercise of having it audit the files. Tell it, you're not allowed to delete any, but we just need to audit this for structure, naming conventions, open the PDFs if you need to name them properly, and so on. So having the data structured, which AI can do overnight or even in a couple hours, depending on how many files you have, structure it, and then create a memory document for it to reference from there. That's a second type of memory document in here. Then we have field memory. So I connect my version of the field memory to my meeting note taker. So, whether they're having daily on-site meetings, whether you guys are having weekly huddles, whatever you're doing, if you guys implement a universal note taker that attends all these meetings, it will have the transcript of every single meeting and know up to date what's happening on every single job site based on those meetings, right? So I would recommend to implement one universal standard note taker. We've all seen those AI note takers all over the place. One AI note taker for the entire organization will literally unlock like unfathomable, like actionable items here. And the cool part is your memory document will know exactly what's going on today. Okay. And then you have the handover memory. So this is asset data for like operations, or O&M manuals, whatever other documents that you guys think are going to be valuable here or referenceable things you can add here. Also, you could have an email address dedicated to this AI memory. And when you CC it on an email, that means that you want it to know what's going on in that email thread, and you want it to have this reference to, whatever is happening in this project or whatnot. You could tell your team, hey, when you want to add something to our overall company memory, CC this email. Everything from this that this email CC'd on will be absorbed into the company's memories. Okay, cool. Um, Awesome. Let's keep going. I talked a little bit about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. But the MD documents do create a tool agnostic system. So you guys can go anywhere and you have the power in your hands to not be tied to a specific AI model, right? Knowledge is stored in open files and native record. AI sits on top of this stack, using it as an interface to company knowledge. Retrieval layer finds the right context rather than the model reading everything again. Externalized prompt library for portability across different AI vendors, and then future-proofed connections via open standards like Model Context Protocol, which is just another fancy word for, it's going to have the integrations built. All right, so now you guys know quite a bit of stuff around creating a memory for your company. Let's talk about, if I were to walk into a construction company, I'm still chatting with the company from Friday that kind of inspired this whole thing about, how do we go deeper here? How do we do more with them? It was a really interesting meeting, and I was thinking about this over the weekend. Like, if I was starting from zero, which arguably they are, um, then how would I roll this out to the organization, if I were to help them roll something like this out? I'm going to pause before I jump into these phases because I have a question in the Q&A. Size limitations and creating project knowledge base. So the answer to that is no, no limitation. It might require different methods. If you're not getting the best accurate responses after, the 500,000th PDF that you've added, um, maybe you look at creating a vector database, and that would solve that for sure. But you got to think about, the models that we're using, they're only getting better. The models that we're using are trained on a vast, vast amount more data that it can reference, way more than any of our companies could ever generate, And the other thing is, you can decide how it operates and scrolls through all of these files. If you're okay for it to, take 30 seconds, it can probably reference a lot more than if you're, forcing it to skim things and give it to you in 5 seconds, right? So there's a lot of different little tips and tricks that you can do to try to figure out what works for you. But the key thing is like, there's not really a limitation. I have this thing on my company brain. I have like kind of a little branch for my own personal brain. It reads every email. It's in every meeting. It knows every meeting note. It knows every click that happened on my website, who visited the website from the CRM. It knows all the deal activity. It moves things through the CRM. It's even like part of my Slack channel, like my direct messaging with my team. It reads every single message every single morning. It knows my calendar. It knows what's upcoming. It knows where I'm traveling. It knows what I need to do. It knows what I said I would do in my meetings. And I've been using this all year. And it's only getting better. And with 4.7, it's only getting faster. So I wouldn't worry about limitations. My project data would count somewhere between 6 to 8 gigabytes per project. That's not uncommon. And what you want to do is you want to create the markdown on top of it. So you can basically create a little markdown document within each folder when you have it run through and create all this markdown. In that markdown document, you'll need to process that 6 to 8 gigabytes one time for sure, but you want to prevent yourself from processing it more than once. Okay. And you want to make it easy for it to be able to retrieve things out of those 6 to 8 gigabytes. And when I mentioned, the file naming structure is important, it is important because if you have that 6 to 8 gigabytes, let's say it's, 1,000 documents or it's 500 documents, right? If the files are named correctly, you're going to use a lot less compute to get to the right file, especially if there's a markdown document on top of it, guiding it about what the little summary is on all 500 documents. Keep in mind, like these markdown documents can be huge. Claude, their own team, only uses one markdown document, one. I personally have a ton of them because I'm letting Claude create as many markdown documents as it wants. It kind of categorizes and divides and conquers. But the Claude code team, they have one markdown document that's just 1 million miles long. Like they're developing features with zero human interaction in a weekend that changes the way that we work forever. And they're doing it with one markdown document about how their company operates and what they built and how things are structured. And if they were to put like arguably like one of the largest tech companies that is really changing the world right now, if they can operate off one markdown document, like there's no reason why you can't kind of have 6 to 8 gigabytes worth of summarization in one markdown document in that folder structure. But when you're working through this, I would also just pre-reference that to Claude, being like, hey, it's gonna see, be like, hey, just so you know, like there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm in construction, right? Like we got lots of documents. Documents are flying all over the place, and we have really long PDFs, or they're really high resolution plans, or whatever it is. Plan accordingly, right? It knows how to do that. And even if you didn't pre-prompt that, they look at the file size before they dive into them. I recently we're training a sorry, I'm going to get back to the planner here. We're training a weekly certified payroll. Yeah, no problem. Happy to help. We're training a weekly certified payroll AI agent right now in our company. Contracts Connected will be able to fully analyze weekly certified payrolls, and we're getting really close. But Lars, my co-founder, he ran a GC for 15 years. All of his projects were federal, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of documents. And I needed to go through all of those folders and subfolders, and I needed to pull out all the Davis Bacon wage decisions. I needed to pull out all the weekly certified payrolls, and I needed to pull out all the daily reports. And I was with one prompt in the proper structure with the proper markdown that I ran before, like I'm telling you guys to do. I was able to run through, I think it was like, I don't know, I think it was like 2 terabytes in like 30 minutes, 2 terabytes of data. And it was able to pull them all out, put them in a separate folder, and then I hand them off to the team that's training that certified payroll agent. Okay. So I wouldn't be too worried about that, but it's something to think about. And also, if you structure this correctly, you won't be spending a lot of your compute and a lot of your tokens redoing it over and over and over. All right, phase one, somebody's got to own this thing. Pick the right person, do it yourself. You guys are obviously the leaders as far as AI adoption if you're here. Um, Establish, what you're going to start out with, whether you're going to start out with the interview, whether you're going to start out with the file structure. This is just phase one. Get started, even if it's just an interview with yourself and how the company works. Get started with something minimal. Phase two, pilot. Apply to one active and one completed project for live operational value and historical learning. So once you kind of build out the first version, you don't need this is not all or nothing. If you guys are kind of like, oh, I don't know, like let me try it and let me do a little test first before I like train the whole organization, or let me do a little test first before I restructure all of the files on our entire server. I don't blame you. So I built in the phase two, which is pick a project, completed, active, and have it run a little test. So that way, if it renames something weird, you don't have to rename the whole file structure across the whole system server. You could just fix that one project. Um, yeah. So I got a Q&A here about the folder structure. Um, are you talking about you want to know the sample of the folder structure for the MD or the sample of the folder structure for your project documents? Let me know that and then I'll jump back over there. All right, so let's talk, okay, project data. So with project data, I mean, how you guys would logically, humanly structure this stuff would be the easiest way. But if I had to throw a structure at you, it's like, okay, we have a project folder, and then we have like a commitment for this vendor, a commitment for that vendor, a commitment for this vendor. All of the documents for that vendor can just live in that folder. It doesn't matter if it's like on-site compliance type of documents or, part of the commitment package. It can all live together. But if you wanted to do like two folders within that vendor, you could do, upfront contract package and then on-site documentation, if you want to. That would be pretty easy for it to navigate through. All right. Reliability, build an evaluation suite of recurring business questions to test accuracy. So we do this every single morning at Contracts Connected. We have a variety of AI tools working in the background for general contractors, everything from certificates of insurance, analyzing Accord 25 forms, analyzing endorsements, running questions across all of their projects, which vendors can be paid today, which vendors can be on site, what's the next 5 expiration dates for COIs that I need to be tracking on? When's the last communication sent around this? We have a whole standard list of questions that we run every single morning and we get a quality score back from. You don't need to be this regimented, especially if you're not changing the system. But this owner needs to have some sort of like, okay, these are the most common questions that our team is going to ask about these documents. And I'm going to ask them, every week, every 2 weeks, whatever it is. Maybe it takes me 5 minutes, maybe it takes me, 30 minutes, depending on how many questions you have in there. But if you find it going crazy and cattywampus, like that owner needs to course correct. And course correcting is going to come in the form of like going into those markdown documents and being like, oh, well, this is why, because here it says that we store these documents in this folder and we clearly don't. These documents will be, located over here in the accounting folder or whatever it is. All right, phase four. Once you basically have a project, your test project ready, you're testing it, you're asking questions, you're getting value from it. You want to just kind of open up the floodgates to more documents, more document types, more files, and you can even start to incorporate those things like the meeting note tool. You can start to incorporate the things like that email address that if you CC that email address, it will be aware of and add to the brain whatever you have CC'd there. And then this is going to be something like, I'm not sure where this is going to end up, whether there's going to be full-time people in organizations just dedicated to, this AI brain that you guys are operating on, because at the end of the day, all the agents that you want to build to go do the work for you eventually are going to need this brain. And the sooner that you create it, the better, because it's only going to compound on itself. It's one of the few tools and investments you can do right now in technology, at least, that you own 100% of, that's leveraging things that you already have, that's arguably free, and that's only going to compound on itself and get more valuable the more you use it, the more meeting notes that you put in there. Think about all the meetings that are happening in your organization just today, just in the next 24 hours, that are not being added to a shared memory, that are not being added to a brain. There's business decisions being made. There's things happening on projects. There's things going wrong that this type of brain would be able to catch earlier and find and remind you guys about lessons learned. Even if it happened to a different PM on a different project, it could say, hey, Scott dealt with the same exact situation. Here's the context around it. Here's the daily meeting that he had in the job site trailer from those few days and some of the summaries. You might want to call him and chat about that. That kind of stuff is preemptive and it can only be built on foundational compounding knowledge. The sooner you guys start with this, like the better, but this needs to be something that's continuous. And I think that the better that you guys can start building this out, the better off your organization will be. And like I said, there should be some feeling of urgency right now because the sooner you do it, the more it can compound, like wouldn't you have wished you invested in the stock market like, 30 years ago? What would that investment be worth today just without you having to add any more investment into it? That's how I'm thinking about these systems. If you just start it today, it's going to compound on itself the longer we go. All right, so let's talk about that governance of this system. You have this system built, you built it out. What's that continuous system look like? Autonomy is, a mature ladder. So from answering questions to careful governed execution, that's that transition from, hey, this answers questions for us about our company to, hey, this just did the work for us. Execution, agents. We're seeing 2026 be the year of AI agents, not just chat, right? The next thing is data security, and this must be built in from the beginning. Some of you guys are operating under CMMC, some of you guys are not. If you're not, lucky you. But essentially, like you want to make sure that this is when you're giving files away to be referenced by AI, you just need to think about the security. One way to get around it, if you are, sensitive to this, and I mentioned this also in the beginning of the call, is there might be a trend, unless they can bring the cost of compute down for us, and make, things like Anthropic and Claude cheaper. There might be a trend where you put another server in your closet right next to your server that has all your files, and that thing, all it does is just run the model, and then it's local and nothing ever goes up to the cloud. It's always local. It just stays with you. Oops. Um, Ensure AI only has access to the necessary information, so you will pick which files you actually give it access to. Beware of prompt injection. This is if you're allowing it to browse the internet, or if you have it access that email address. Somebody could email it something malicious and it remembers it and or it emails back or something like that. Start with read-only intelligence before enabling automation, so things like letting it move or delete files and so on. And then building this durable, structured, open knowledge prepares your company for these future AI tools. Who knows where we're going to be in 6 months, but I can pretty confidently bet that these markdown documents, this system is going to evolve with the tools. This is the way that we're seeing the industry go. AI needs to be able to reference things quickly, use less compute, and read them fast. People are even going to extremes where they're telling they're telling their markdown documents when they're building them to talk like a caveman, because cavemen use less words, like me like tool, like instead of like I like this tool, me like tool gets the same context across to the AI. The AI doesn't care if it says me like tool or I like this tool, because at the end of the day, they're trying to use less compute. Less characters means less processing. So it's kind of a funny thing because everyone's talking like cavemen now in like the tech world. But yeah, it's real. It uses less characters, it's logical, but it's still, the AI doesn't care if it's written like a caveman as long as the point gets across the same. Transforming the project data into usable organizational intelligence, and then basically this becomes an operational asset that's going to compound over time for you guys. So I'm going to go and share, I have like 9 minutes left here. I was going to share my Claude here and just show you guys like where you'd want to be and where you'd want to go. I simply, just gave a couple YouTube tutorials to one of our onboarding specialists. at Contracts Connected and told her, hey, like, this is a sick unlock. Like, I'm gonna spend some dedicated time with you to build out your own little personal memory. But watch a couple YouTube videos. And she watched the first one and went down the rabbit hole. And you could find this stuff like around in terms of, creating memory documents or creating MD file structure system for Claude Cowork in your organization. Now, what you guys want to make sure that you're doing is you want to make sure that you're in the desktop app. That's the first step. And then you want to make sure that you're in Cowork. Okay. And in Cowork, you can give it different access to different files here. So you can see I have a Claude OS system that houses a lot of my markdown files. This is its memory. So you want to basically come in here. This is the section in which you will pick the file off your computer. Now, if you're using markdown files that is going to be used across the entire organization, you can create them in a Google Drive, in a whatever that people can all have on their computer that will always be updatable and referenceable. So that person that's governing this thing can make sure that when they go update something in Google Drive, that it goes out to everybody, right? You'd pick that file here, or if you're going to tell it to operate within your entire, 8 GB project folders, or maybe it's a 2 TB folder full of project documents, right? Then you want to make sure that you have that folder selected here, and you're going to say, okay, now we're going to work on the naming structure. Okay, now you're going to create markdown documents. Okay, now I'm going to go put those markdown documents in the shared folder that everybody will have referenced right here. Okay, everybody will need to be in Cowork. Cowork is what operates off the MD file system. Your normal chat in Anthropic does not really reference MD files. Okay, you need to be in Cowork or Code. Claude Cowork or Code. That's what the team needs to be operating in. And arguably, Cowork is going to give them better results every single time anyway, because it breaks complex tasks down into more simple, manageable steps. It works for longer, it thinks more thoroughly, and it gives you a better result. Okay. And it can reference a ton of markdown files. So that's key here. And basically what you would want to just say here in the prompt is, hey, I'm going to be creating the markdown file structure. Like build this out into phases and guide me. But the first thing I need you to do is interview me about the company. So you have full context about the company, who does what roles are responsible for what responsibilities. And then you can get into, the origin story of the company, who you are, what kind of projects you build, so on. But say like, hey, I want you to ask me 50 questions. I would highly recommend that you guys use this microphone here to answer it back. And then you'll basically see, it'll say, okay, yeah, thanks for your response. I'm going to update the MD file system now. It goes and updates the MD file. It goes and creates new MD files and so on. Now, once you have that, I would say phase two, you're going to say, hey, I'm going to also add a folder here of all of the files. I want to ultimately have an MD file system that's going to be able to reference and retrieve information and documents out of the system for all of the employees at our company. Can you help me with these step by step? Sure, first things first, let's audit these things. Oh, I found all of these crazy files in random places with bad filing naming structure. Do you want to simplify this? Do you want to standardize this? Yes. Okay, if yes, what's the file naming structure you want me to follow? Follow this file naming structure. You do not have permission to delete any. Okay, great. Okay, now that you have the file structure done, let's do phase four, or maybe I'm on phase three, but anyway, you get the point. Phase four is like, okay, now create the MD file system that's going to be allowing you to reference through all of these. This file server should be, remotely be able to be accessed as well, so it's always up to date. And then you can have your governance person come in here every morning and just, update it on the files, the new files that were added in the past 24 hours or 1 week or whatever it is. You can also schedule that to happen automatically using the schedules feature here. And then after that, it's up to you. If you want to connect meeting notes through connectors, if you want to have every PM, every job site use the same meeting note taker and start building that foundation of knowledge, that's really powerful. If you want to start incorporating emails, you can do that as well. So it's very simple, guys. And if you YouTube, setting up Claude Cowork for organizations or enterprises. There's really simple tutorials. They're like 20 minutes long. I can do a whole webinar just like us setting one up if you'd like. But overall, I thought that all of the background that I gave you guys would be really important to know and understand. So you could basically, build this out to how you might want it for your organization, why the urgency, what we're doing now, how you guys should be kind of like working through it. So yeah, that's kind of it. And we have 3 minutes, so I wanted to make sure I had at least a couple of minutes to go through questions. I'm super accessible through this school community if you guys haven't joined already. But there's no reason why like anybody can't be doing this. Like a $20 a month Claude subscription, or like I think it's $100 a month for 5 people to have a subscription on a team or an organization. Like this stuff is here. Not a lot of people are doing it. It does take somebody that has the motivation to get through it, that does have the motivation to not be left behind, the motivation to be ahead, the motivation to like want these tools, to be like, holy crap, that's good. It does take motivation from the right people in an organization to do so. But there is this gap here where it hasn't been commercialized, it hasn't been built for the general public yet. It probably will be. We're building it for the back office, and I'm like debating if I release my agent to be more than just for the back office. But yeah, I would love to work with anybody if they have thoughts or ideas around what these agents could do. Right now, we're doing quite a bit with basically everything a project coordinator or contract administrator would do. But yeah, I think that overall, guys, like this should feel very actionable on your end. You now know all the knowledge and all the background. Like if you're listening intentively here, you know exactly how it all operates. You know why, you know what steps need to be done, you know how to roll it out. And there's no reason why a week from today, you don't have this for your company. Every company has a memory. It's just, where is it? How's it being used? And is it, being leveraged to the fullest extent or not? So that's what I got for you guys today. I don't see a lot of question and answer or Q&A questions coming in. I have the AI blueprint here. I'm posting as much as I can in here. Um, but yeah, hopefully you guys got some value out of this one. I thought last week's was a pretty good training as well. It's funny because I have like 250 people in here registered, and then I like don't see anybody's faces, and I don't see like the real feedback. So I just keep making these, and people keep showing up and keep registering. So I hope this was valuable to you guys. This is, stuff I'm already doing. So all of this stuff is just specifically to give you guys value at the end of the day. So I hope that it does. And thanks, Manny. Thanks for the compliment on the class. Um, yeah, thank you guys for joining. It's great to see a lot of regular faces, which means that I think I'm doing something right. So it is 11 o'clock, and I have an onboarding for a new user at Contracts Connected. We're going to get them set up with some AI powered back office stuff. So if you guys want to check out what I do for my real job, this is like for fun, believe it or not. But um, uh, check us out, contractsconnected.com. Also, you guys could check out the community there if you haven't yet. All right. I will see you guys next week. If you guys have any ideas on what you want to see me present, let me know. Otherwise, I think that I'm going to probably talk about the new models, Opus 4.7. We have Claude Design out. We have the new ChatGPT model. We have a lot already out. I feel like I'm behind on the news, but I've been trying to make these more practical how-tos. But maybe tomorrow, maybe next week we'll get into all the new updates and releases and stuff like that. So All right, I don't want to be too late for this onboarding for this new user that we got. So I want to welcome them to the platform and congratulate them. So I will see you guys next week. Thanks.